take your time. Like don't feel pressurized or rushed to do something because you're seeing the next person do it. I think that's a lot where social media comes in is you're looking at someone else's career and you're like, why they're saying to themselves, why am I not here? Well, you know what? That's not your time and place to say that. I think my advice is to learn as much as you can, do your best job, do the best work you possibly can. Be critical of yourself, but don't be hypercritical where you're holding yourself back. I think, having a few trusted ears is good to give you that push and encourage you.
Today is Monday, February 10th, 2025. Who are we speaking with?
My name is Aaron Paar.
Tell people who is Aaron Paar and who are the Teflon Dons?
Okay, so I'm a DJ and producer here based in LA. I've been pretty much DJing for a good 30 plus years and just a music fan, collector, going back before that actually. But yeah, Teflon Don's is my production moniker. It can be me. It can also be my partners. I have a couple other partners that I started the group with. One's kind of retired, but I usually hold down the Teflon Don's moniker, whether it's solo or with a collaborative thing. And that's it. Yeah.
Um, Before we get into you, I'd like for you to paint a picture of the LA house scene. So say, for example, my boy Kai is coming from Munich and wants to come to LA for 8 days and check out the scene. Paint a picture of the LA scene. So he's here for 8 days. Where should he go? What are the parties? What neighborhoods? What's the vibe? Like, what's the current state of the LA scene?
Well, currently it's a little bit, there isn't like an institutional weekly, I would say. Apart from the Utopia parties, which were at Mama Shelter on the rooftop, that was a good place for out of towners to go. It was a weekly rooftop event. So that was a good place. Other than that, you kind of have to sort of scour the underground to find really good events now these days because there isn't like a quote unquote weekly institutional house music event that I could say in confidence that, oh, you got to go here. The Utopia parties were probably the closest that we had, but unfortunately, the rooftop venue has now closed. So that would be one place. But just knowing the DJs and the some of the producers in town, you can get a good idea of what's going on any given week in Los Angeles through social media, resident advisor. There are a couple of good rotating underground parties that happen in Los Angeles, but you really have to know behind it to get a sense.
Got it. Um, let's go to the beginning. Where were you born and where'd you grow up?
So I was born in Nottingham, England. I came to LA first in 1977. I was born in '74 and came out for about a year and a half with my mother. And she was just trying to establish herself here in Los Angeles. And I went back to England for a good 3 years to stay with my grandparents and came out here full time 1981. And she had met my dad, my stepdad, and they got married. And then I came over to live full time. So I was basically raised in Los Angeles in the Hollywood area, in Hollywood, West Hollywood, right on the border there, La Brea, Melrose area. From there, I just went to school and made a bunch of friends and came into my own into music in that era.
Your grandmother played piano and your mom was a fan of classic rock. How did those early exposures shape your understanding of music and influence your productions?
Well, yeah, just I think at an early age, music was always in my life. My biological father, he was a guitar player. He also wrote music. My mother was an avid rock and folk rock music fan. So I heard a lot of that stuff, Beatles, Stones, any British, UK rock bands that were big in the household. And then my grandparents were into older music. And my first experience with records was actually learning how to respect a record was when my grandparents would have parties at their house, I would be the selector. In other words, while they were doing their thing, I was the one changing the records over and putting the records on the turntable. So I had a sense of what a record was and what it could do. And it's always fascinated me that these discs contain so much joy and information. So really that sort of started my musical understanding. And then just from that point on is finding my sound, what I like, as a young kid. What really opened me up was the hip hop movement in the mid 80s. In 1984, I fell in love with groups like Run DMC. And even before that, I was intrigued by electronic music via Planet Patrol, Play at Your Own Risk, and Planet Rock, and those early electronic beats really screamed, "This is the future." Um, I was already into sci-fi stuff, so that sound also, and just the harmonies of black music groups. I was heavily got into soul, old soul and Motown, and just all the classics around that time in the mid '80s, and really, you know, as hip hop progressed and sampling came along and James Brown, then it was just a matter of just connecting the dots of like who did what and going from there. And that's how my musical knowledge opened up into black music, really flourished during the hip hop era in the mid 80s. And that's kind of opened up the door for me to say, okay, where can I go next with music?
Seeing the Jam Master Jay Rockbox video was a pivotal moment for you. Describe the
Yes.
feeling it sparked in you, and how did it set you on a path to becoming a DJ?
Well, the video is it's kind of when you watch it, you see this like it's funny. You see sort of like this white blonde haired kid in this gets brought into the fold of Run DMC in New York and hip hop. He gets pulled into the limousine. They go to this party and Jam Master Jay's there with turntables and doing this thing, and really that really sparked my interest. Like, wow, this is something different. It's not a band, with guitarists and drummers and keyboardists. It's just two guys on the mic and somebody with these record players. So that really sparked my interest into like, yeah, I kind of want to do that, and started just buying records. Like I always knew I wanted to get into it, but I had no way to do it because I had no, I was 10 years old and I didn't have a job. My parents weren't able to buy me turntables and stuff like that. Um, and yeah, from that point on, it really just inspired me to look further into that. And hearing the K Day Mix Masters on air in Los Angeles on K Day 1580 AM, hearing how music was played in these mix shows and how one record would go into the next, I was like, okay, this is the DJ thing, like where where can I do this? Where can I find more of this? So that really just started a hunger and me to like really start a deep dive into what it was about. Um, that's really it. It's just buying records and saying, well, maybe one day I will get these turntables and then be able to do some of the stuff I'm seeing and hearing. That's kind of how it started. So.
You discovered house music while in the UK.
Yeah,
Uh,
I went back to school. Yeah, go ahead. I'll let you
oh,
finish
keep
the
going.
question.
Oh, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Yeah, so I went back to finish high school in England. In Los Angeles during the time, there was a lot of this was the crack era, 80s in LA. There was a lot of street stuff happening. I was getting sort of mixed up with the wrong crowd, so to speak. My mom was concerned with where I was going, so she sent me back to England to live with my grandparents for 2 years. And during that time in England, I bought a lot of what I was already feeling on the streets, which was hip hop and rap music and that stuff. But when I was over there, it's like 1987. house music in the UK was a big thing. It's sort of like Chicago, especially the Chicago acts. They were doing these compilations, and some of those early songs like "Love Can't Turn Around" and other songs of that nature were hitting the charts. They were number one on top of the pops. So that hearing that was kind of intriguing me because I was already into electronic music, but I wasn't really familiar with the deep disco roots. I knew like regular disco and funk and a lot of the funk that hip hop samples. But when I heard house, it was kind of foreign to me. And it wasn't until I went down to London and heard pirate radio where I started hearing mix shows that really opened me up to the kind of house music I liked, which is more of a deeper sound, like some stuff by Larry Heard, Mr. Fingers, Fingers Incorporated, and stuff of that ilk. The house music I was listening to that was more mainstream in UK at the time was cool, but I wasn't fully sold into it. And when I heard some of these other deeper songs that I was hearing on pirate radio, that's when it opened me up to like, okay, I like some of this stuff, and let me start investigating this stuff a little bit more, while still loving hip hop and electro and funk and stuff. But this sort of say, okay, let me start buying some of this stuff. So that's kind of how it started for me.
What was it about the Chicago and Detroit sound that resonated with you? And how did that differ from like the New York freestyle and club classics for you?
Well, I think with the New York sound, the it was very much had a distinct flavor and style, which I liked. The club sound of New York. Um, but with Chicago and Detroit music, there was something else in there. With Chicago stuff, it was a lot more. I would say, I'd say a homage to like Philly soul and disco classics and stuff. Um, a little bit more prominent, I think. And New York, the stuff I was hearing, this is a little different. I mean, even though they did use that stuff, there's something about the Detroit stuff too. I think coming from the electro background, that they were able to incorporate these sort of futuristic soundscapes and modern instruments that they were using it in a very distinct way. So I think all in all, like at that time, I don't think I really had a distinction of what was Chicago, Detroit, and New York. I think it was just good music. There was a lot of good stuff being made. I think later on, when in the mid '90s, when I was becoming more established for playing house music, that's when you try to kind of like, all right, this is Chicago, this is New York. You kind of go back a little bit. But at that time, when I was hearing it, a lot of it sounded good. Like there was stuff from New York that sounded like it could have been from Chicago. There was a lot of overlap, but I didn't really realize that till later on.
Talk about the hip house movement. How did you see it as a sound where you could express your identity?
The hip house movement was like a bridge for me because it was like, a lot of the hip hop artists were doing faster dance tracks. Of course, the Jungle Brothers, Big Daddy Kane, and whatnot. Um, but hearing the Chicago hip house guys like Cool Rock Steady and Fast Eddie and Tyree and all those guys, it was more raw because they knew how to really do house music. Not saying that Todd Terry didn't, but what the Chicago hip house guys did and how they flexed their rhymes over it was really like, damn, this is dope. But unfortunately, it didn't last that long. It kind of evolved into something else later on, and with hip hop, I got really into sampling and the jazz funk elements. So when artists like Wayne Gardner in New Jersey, Pal Joey, the Burrell Brothers, a lot of the New York guys started bringing it more like a more jazzy template with the house. So that whole sound, I was really into the New Jersey stuff and how they incorporated jazz elements into the house music. So that was big for me too. And I think that kind of evolved from hip house because hip hop always samples and goes back. And so that's house music does too, but the sampling aspect of it really interested me and how Pal Joey would sort of marry hip hop sampling and phrasing is like Todd Terry and Kenny Dope. that style of house music really that grabbed me. I was like, okay, this is my sound. I can identify with this type of sound because I've come from a hip hop, the love of hip hop and soul and funk. But with the house music, they're bringing in this jazz, sampling old break beats into the music. So that's really how I sort of established my sound as a DJ in LA. I was known for playing a type of sound as opposed to other DJs in LA. There wasn't that many house music DJs in LA in the early 90s that were playing the kind of sound me and my crew were playing because we were playing those B-sides, those slept on unknown joints as opposed to like the bigger, Def Mix, Morales stuff or, the more big vocal piano bangers or whatever. We were playing the more like subtle, sort of deep dubby stuff. So I think that the hip hop sound and the hip house sound kind of I grew from that into what I was doing in that period in the early 90s.
Talk to us about the 1993 New Music Seminar and Frankie Knuckles set at the Sound Factory bar. You previously mentioned that they've been transformative
Man,
experiences. So what about that night solidified your commitment to house music?
well, it was I went out there on a wing and a prayer, man. You know what I mean? Like I had no money, had enough money to get a flight. Um, I was staying with a family friend of mine in the village, and house music in 1993. I mean, that was a beautiful period for house music. As you know, the records that were coming out were just all phenomenal. I mean, I don't think there was anything bad, really. I mean, there probably was, but the majority of the music that was coming out was amazing. So just going to New York for the first time ever, I was 19 years old and just soaking in the sights and the sounds of the city. It was beautiful. And then, made my rounds to the shelter and eventually I got to Sound Factory Bar to see Frankie Knuckles play. And it was one of those things, like from the first or second track, it just grabbed me, man. Like I was there on the floor. Next thing you know, 4 or 5 hours later, just the whole room was this communal vibe that you can't really, it's really hard to explain. It was just a feeling. And there was just this, I remember him playing Alison Limerick's Where Love Lives, like towards the end of the night. And I mean, it was just like, just catching a Holy Ghost, man. This feeling is something in your spirit, in your body. And just seeing people crying on the dance floor and it was just beautiful. And really that said, yeah, this is where I want to be. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to express myself in music and into production. And yeah, that's really where sparked off a lot for me. That put a battery in my back to keep going ahead with it.
Take me back to Street Sounds Records on Melrose in LA. What made that place so special, and how did it foster the connections that you've made to form Teflon Dons?
Street Sounds Records is a very, very special shop at a time where most of the DJs that were going in there were working DJs. So you got to meet a lot of DJs that was our social media, going to record stores, and meeting other DJs, what they were playing, where they were playing, you know, what was happening in the scene. And I met a lot of great people there. I met Marcus B. He was a local DJ here in LA by way of St. Louis. He had a real dope ear for certain tracks that I like too. So we kind of connected on the kind of music we were buying. And he invited me into the fold of him and another DJ by the name of DJ Create, aka Dave Fogg, who both of those guys later on we became the Teflon Dons basically. At that time, I was brought into the crew called Shaolin Temple Sound System, and we had our own mobile and we used to do parties. But Street Sounds was a great shop. It just up the street. So there was another shop called Prime Cuts where a lot of DJs would shop too. which primarily catered to the gay West Hollywood gay club scene. Street Sounds was a little bit different. I think they catered to that as well, but they had other they were selling other music and other types of DJs were going in there. Yeah, it was just special, man. I met a lot of great people. Barry Weaver, a legend here in LA who many people might not know. He really put me on to a lot of Detroit techno stuff. And another cat named Steve Loria. This was during 1990 when Los Angeles was the forefront of the rave scene. And really that put the rave scene in Los Angeles on the map, and for the whole country. Kind of inspired by the UK rave scene in the late 80s. And going out with these guys, going to these underground parties and raves, opened me up to a whole other thing too, which inspired me when I was hanging with Marcus and Creates. Like, why don't we do our own version of this, but in a smaller setting, and kind of bring that loft energy back that we were hearing about in New York? So we started doing our own loft parties and small room, maybe 100 people, but we were playing the type of music we wanted to play as opposed to, a rave energy. It's more like a deep underground house. We were just keeping it deep all night. There was just you wouldn't hear one mainstream house record in there. It was incredible. But Street Sounds was a great shop, and it was awesome just to walk down Melrose and go to those stores at the time.
How did the name Teflon Dons come about?
Well, the name Teflon Dons came, but I was sort of obsessed with reading crime novels, especially true crime. So I was I was reading a lot of novel books like Donnie Brasco. This was before the film, the Gotti stuff, Wise Guy, and even fictional stuff too. I was just really into true crime and mafia stuff. So I came across the Gotti book, I heard that he was dubbed as the Teflon Don, that he was untouchable. And I was just I think I was in the UK. I went back for vacation, and I was just kind of I put out my first single on my label World Ship. I put out called Planet Eater. That was the first thing. So when I was in England, I think that year or sometime around the end of that year in '95, um, I just was writing notes, ideas for the label, and I came up with the Teflon Dons. I thought this would be a cool name for like a crew or a production duo or production outfit. And yeah, that's how it came about. It was just purely from reading true crime books. Yeah.
Tell us about your journey from DJing to music production. How did that start? Why did that start?
Well, the music production thing, I've always been into synthesizers, keyboards, music in general, any kind of instrument really, drums, hand drums. I knew at some point there would be a connection with what I was DJing in house and production. Um, a friend of my family, um, one of the gentlemen, he had a garage full of equipment, like everything, drums, keyboards, drum machines. So I just started messing around with the drum machines. So I was like, I wanted to put, banging out hip hop beats. A little Elasis HR16, very simple drum machine. So I learned how to program this thing at 14 years old. And then I started playing keyboards along with the drums. Like, oh, yeah, this is fun. But I think around 1992, 91, 92, a friend of mine let me borrow his MPC, Makai MPC 60, the first MPC unit. And that's when I started getting into sampling and, this is fun, you know, I think I got a flow for this, got an ear for it. So I started messing around that, but he took the MPC back. So I was without any gear, but I was still DJing. I was like, at some point I'm going to get something and make music. And in '94, I got the SP1200 EMU emulator, SP1200 unit, a sampling drum machine. And yeah, from '94 till '95, every day I worked on this thing for 3, 4 hours, maybe more. And that's when I came up with my first track, Planet Eater, and I put it on a cassette tape straight out the box, from the SP, no mixing board or anything. Gave it to Dave Fogg, the Teflon Don, and some other homies. And they was like, yo, this is banging, man. You should keep doing this, like put this out or do something with it. So I came up with a couple other tracks, and that's really how the first record came about. And was introduced to Greg Ski Royal through Dave Fogg, who's worked with Greg on some hip hop stuff. And Greg Ski Royal, if you look him up, he mix engineered the Chronic LP, did a lot of work with Jody Watley, Guy, mostly doing edits and mixes and different versions on MCA. And, from that point on, Greg brought me in. I bought the SB 1200 over there. We multi-tracked everything. And that was it. I was like, I had my first mastered record, my tape. So I was like, okay, now I got to figure out how to put this on vinyl. So then I was asking around people locally in the scene, how do I do this? And it was really just trial and error, just finding who did what. There was a guy named Richard Simpson who cut the lacquers right in Hollywood, right on Vine and Santa Monica Boulevard. Took the bus over there with my tape, that tape. He hooked it up, mastered it. He sent the lacquers to Bill Smith Custom Records in El Segundo. And that's how I came up with my first record. I had a little bit of help. My dad helped me finance, gave me like $600 or something to help press it up. And that's how it all started, man, from that point on. And I said, you know what? I sold those records, not real fast, but enough to say I can keep doing this, and had a day job, financed the record basically from my day job and whatever money I could put together, and just kept going with it, and kept writing music.
What's your process for finding and selecting samples?
The process could be just listening to music, one of my DJ mentors, Barry Weaver, actually, he said, and this, I think he got this from a lot of the great disco DJs from the 70s and 80s, is that you have to know your music. You listen to your music from start to finish. Um, Listen to the ins and outs, music theory, when things come in, when things go out, the best time to mix a record. So, I would just put records on the turntable, and things would hit my ear like, oh, okay. And then I would just make notes of it, put the record to the side. And that's how it would really start. Sometimes the sample would start from a vocal, sometimes it start with a keyboard. With the SB 1200, we had 10 seconds of sampling time. So, you know, I could hear a drum kick from a Carrie Chandler record. I'm like, yeah, I like that kick. I'm gonna sample that kick. So I sampled the kick, get a hi-hat from another record, so on. A clap from another record. This was before sound packs. Every track that I made on Worldship was a sample, a little hit here, hit there from a vinyl record. So it gives you a certain sound. You create your own drum kit, so to speak. And then with other samples like vocals and keyboards and bass lines, whether it be a loop or just a bass sound, that's where it's more like a sound collage, like kind of like what the Bomb Squad were doing with hip hop. They would sample so much from so many different sources, but put it together and make it work. I think that's being a DJ really helps, because you have all this access to music, and then how you piece it together in your mind to mix. That's how you kind of create your own sound, and that was my look at this. I was looking at house music less from a musician standpoint and more from a DJ standpoint, meaning like, and like in this where the hip hop thing comes in. A lot of the hip hop guys, how they sampled and put beats together. That's how I was approaching house music. So that's really was the process.
You've mentioned that you like a hazy, spaced out soul sound in your productions. How do you achieve that atmosphere in the studio?
As far as in the music, or just
In the music, yeah.
I think that just goes from my love of jazz, funk, and electronic music. Really, it's just sort of a combination. I didn't really know about Kraftwerk until after I heard groups like Planet Patrol and Soul Sonic Force because my dad was like, "Oh, if you like this, you love Kraftwerk." I'm like, "Who are Kraftwerk?" You know, this is like 83, 84. And then I heard I'd heard numbers before. I didn't realize it was these guys from Germany, you know. And then I was like, wow, you know. So and then the fact that when I hear guys like Juan Atkins, you know, Cybertron, Detroit, he would say, you know, techno, Detroit techno is like P-Funk and Kraftwerk, you know, they met in an elevator, so to speak. And then I'm reading later on that like Kraftwerk, when they did the, you know, when they did the album with numbers, drawing a blank, um, they were influenced by American funk bands, you know. And you know, it's the music how everyone's kind of influence and bounces ideas off of like what they like and what they hear. So that's really where my sound comes from. It's sort of a electronic, you know, like we could be in a space cantina somewhere listening to like jazz, you know, but it's got that sort of futuristic sound to it. So that's really where it comes from.
How do martial arts films, Conan, Monty Python comics manifest in your music?
Well, this the World Ship name is World Ship music is basically comes from Marvel Comics. World Ship is a ship that was piloted by Galactus, who's a Fantastic Four uh, deity. So he was sort of like a demigod from another planet that came to Earth to eat the planet, to nourish himself. The only way that he could keep alive was he had to eat planets. So he came to Earth, Silver Surfer discovered Earth, and that's really how the world ship mythology started. So within the world ship canon, there's also concepts like the Planet Eater EP was the first record, and then the Rudiments record. There's lots of references in the titles that reference other martial arts forms, martial arts techniques, as well as stuff from the Hyborian Age, Conan universe, which came along with the Black Corsairs project after that. So it's really just it's just our my idea of just having fun, you know, having fun with creating a story behind the tracks, the mood, the feel, the vibe of those titles and those stories, and how you know making the music while loving those things and enjoying them. That's where it all comes from. So it's really just having fun with it, and at the end of the day, not taking yourself too seriously. You know, it's like you know, we do this for fun and approaching these tracks is like, oh, I'm not here to make the classic banger that's going to resonate with the dance floors or this is, you know, this is really personal music. This is stuff that we were doing because we like to do it. And thankfully there's other people that liked it too and they enjoy it. So you know, that's a blessing, you know, when you can actually do what you like to do without having to say, you know, go the cookie cutter assembly line route of I need to make my tracks like this because this works on this floor and this. No, we never went like that. We were doing stuff purely because that's what we love to do. And like I said, we're blessed to have people love and buy and play our records. So, you know, that in itself is a wonderful thing.
You've previously mentioned that the LA house scene is cliquish. Say more.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially in the last 15 years, I noticed that there's a lot of it's there's a lot of cliques and groups that they all kind of stick together. I think that goes to, you know, it's the same in a lot of cities I've noticed. So I think there's just, you know, some people will support others more than others and be less open to new things. I'm really enjoying a lot of the new younger crews that have been popping up in the last 5 years that are doing their own parties and bringing out like really good DJs, like very well known established DJs, and opening up a younger audience to the sound. What's ironic is that they don't know that there's someone like me and others here in LA that have been doing this here in LA forever, and we don't get any love or bookings from it. So it's almost like the out of town peeps will come in, and I know some, you know, some of them are friends, and they're like, "Yo, why aren't you playing with me tonight?" It's like they don't even know who I am, man. You know what I'm saying? So it's like it's the clicks, I think, in the LA house music scene, they've kind of evolved now, and some have been left by the wayside. Others are still kind of doing their thing, but it's normal. It's a normal thing. I think in any healthy scene, you're gonna have different groups. And then, sometimes there will be that one out of town DJ like a Louis Vega or Theo Parrish who come into town. And that's where everyone kind of unites. All the different like cliques will unite under that. But it's kind of sad because it's the only way that we can all come together is when a DJ from out of town comes in, as opposed to like, why can't we just start something and all support each other? We all win at the end of the day if we do that. So that's my one thing about cliques that it can be annoying.
In what ways has the house scene changed from the 90s to today?
I think it's changed. I think it's just changed now because it's more about optics now and how things look as opposed to like going somewhere and really hearing good music. And I think just I think in general the DJ scene and house music and other forms too is that technology has come along and made it easier for a lot of people to get on. Um, and with social media and optics and videos and doing all these sort of things to enhance the persona of what you're doing has taken over from the real raw essence of just going to a spot and hearing great music from someone playing music. It's not necessarily you're going to hear a skilled DJ if they're well known enough or whatever, but you kind of trust the DJ to take you on that journey. I think now the majority of people are more, especially in Los Angeles, are more intrigued by the hype as opposed to like going for the music. They're more into like the scope or magnitude of the event as opposed to just trusting the promoter and DJ to bring you a great musical experience. So that's changed a lot. And I'm sure you've heard a lot from other people that's similar situations where, technology and where we are now in this in the state of humanity, it's a different world now. Things were a lot simpler in the 90s. There was less noise and hype. It was just more like, okay, where can I go to dance? That was the place you went to because, your friends went there, and you knew you were going to have a good time. So I think now things are just so scattered and it's based on optics and how I can be seen, taking pictures of yourself. Oh, I was here at this club, as opposed to just, I'm just gonna go and just enjoy myself. I don't need to tell people where I am. I'll tell them the next day that it was a great party, but I don't need to show people like, oh, I'm here at the event, So yeah, that it's changed a lot, man. And I think it's just society where we are now.
Knowing what you know now, how would you approach your DJ or production career differently?
I mean, I've thought about this, and I think I don't know if I would change too much. I mean, I think there's with opportunities and certain things happen where um, maybe I could have done things a little bit differently. But I'm not one to really say, you know what, I should have done this. It was just the way it was. I think now I'm more knowledgeable about how things work, especially when it comes to manufacturing, making music and putting it out there. It's a lot easier now to get music out there and get it into people's hands, as opposed to back in the day, you had to, fax, distributors, send them the records. Now you can do everything with a couple clicks. So, my label was rediscovered by a cat named Jeremy Underground in Paris. He has a record label called My Love Is Underground. And around 2005, we negotiated him to reissue some of my records, my tracks on a record. And that just opened up an audience of people in Europe and in the States to my music that missed out in the 90s. So from that point on, I kind of rode that momentum and then I relaunched the label in 2018. 2001 was the last record we put out. And then I put out 18 years later, That's when I relaunched the record label, and I think it was more or less to say, you know what, I still have a lot of music to share. There's still a lot of things I can give. So I think the only thing that I would have done differently was um, maybe just instead of like stop making music, maybe just kept on. But we were out on the West Coast, man, and it was in the 2000s. House music was kind of it was changing, and we were isolated out here. We didn't feel like anybody was showing us love, so we just said, you know what, let's put it to bed for a while. But I always knew in my heart, like I still wanted to do it. So I think the only thing I would have probably done differently was just, you know what, just kept doing it and not put it down, and that's it really. I mean, some people say, well, why did you stop? It's like, well, because I wasn't feeling it. So I think that's why I wasn't really feeling like doing it. And then I started getting the hunger again to get the music out there, and that's what made me want to relaunch the label.
Let's talk about advice. What advice would you have for the next generation?
I mean, my advice, I would just say, just enjoy yourself. Don't get caught up in, take your time. Like, don't feel pressurized or rushed to do something because you're seeing the next person do it. I think that's a lot where social media comes in, is you're looking at someone else's career and you're like, why are they saying to themselves, why am I not here? Well, you know what? That's not your time and place to say that. I think my advice is to learn as much as you can, do your best job, do the best work you possibly can. Be critical of yourself, but don't be hypercritical where you're holding yourself back. I think, having a few trusted ears is good to give you that push and encourage you. As a DJ and a producer, like, you need some critical aspects to it, but at the same time, if you're good and you know what you're doing and you love the music and you genuinely feel a passion for it, then nothing should really stop you. You should just go for it, and put your stuff out there. But at the same time, don't hold yourself back. Maybe get a few trusted ears onto your stuff to help push you forward. And don't be afraid to ask for help. I think that's one of the things. I had some help coming up, which is always good. I had people like Greg Royal who helped, mix down my records and make it sound amazing. Don't be afraid to ask, some of the mentors for help and some advice. And that's my advice to young people. Just be genuine, love the music, and practice as much as you can. Like, dedicate, if you really want to do this, dedicate your time and your energy into being the best you can, and stop comparing yourself to others. You just be yourself, and that's it.
Controversial question. Is it possible to make a living in house music and doing DJ and production?
I think it's possible, but um, you need to be very lucky. You need to have a lot of people that are in the industry behind you. It's a machine, just like any industry. You have to get your foot in there, and I think it is possible. But um, that being said, it's very hard too for anybody who has a certain sound that's not maybe as mainstream or popular to make a living doing this, and there's a lot more people doing it now. There's a lot more competition. So that being said, I think it's very hard, and I think a lot of the artists and producers from the '90s, who are finally, they're getting work. It's a struggle. I've seen many people come and go, and I've talked to people I thought were, producers. I thought, wow, you have a regular job just like me, like, it's a humbling thing, but at the end of the day, I think the music speaks for itself. So if you come up with a special song or a record or tune, and that's timeless, and that's what it's all about, really, is making timeless music.
What's your regular job?
Well, right now I'm freelancing. I've been involved in the prop industry, and props for movies, television, and I've been involved in that industry for almost 30 years, and it helped finance many of my records, and been able to still travel across the states and DJ. Right now, I'm not on a regular job. I'm just freelancing. I'm doing what you call as a set dresser or a prop assist. So I'll be working on commercials and get stuff together for those sets and whatnot. It's an interesting thing because it's still a creative field, but it's definitely away from music. So I straddle both worlds. I would love to make the music a full-time situation. And in some cases, I've been really slow on the prop thing. So DJing and music has kept me going. So at the moment, it's sort of like I'm doing both, like I can't say I have one job. It's just like music is always going to be my life. So less a job, you know, than what I do on the other thing to make money to pay bills. It's more like, oh, okay, you're gonna fly me out here and pay me this fee. That's an added bonus for me. You know what I mean? Like that's beautiful. If you get more of that, cool. If it gets to a point where that's all I'm doing, then so be it. But you have to pay the bills and take care of business.
Talk to me about dream collaborations. If money, time, connections, location were not an issue, are there any people that you'd love to collaborate with? For example, like Francois K or Josh Milan or Barbara Tucker or like Osunade? Like, are there any people that's like, man, I'd love to do a record with, you know, Don Tallman, for example?
Yeah, I mean, all those names, those are incredible artists. I think someone like Josh Milan would be definitely a dream collaboration. There's even people in Los Angeles that are not as well known. I'd love to collaborate with. Um, I mean, she is well known. One person in particular who I'd love to collaborate with, who's a friend. She lives in Tokyo, in Japan, and Dea Davenport. And there's one person I mean, we have a history, and she is one person I really love her vocal style and her music. So that's one person in particular. I think it could happen. It's in the cards because we know each other, but it hasn't happened yet. As we put out a Gregory Porter record in '98, and Gregory Porter was a virtually unknown artist in 1998. He was singing with Ronnie Laws, doing some stuff, but he had never been on record, and we got a hold of him through a mutual friend of ours in San Diego where he was living. We brought him up to LA. We put him in the studio, and that's where we did Tomorrow People. So we World Ship Music, Teflon Dons, we were responsible for putting Gregory Porter on the map, as a recording artist. It didn't sell, and he didn't become a Grammy winning artist till much, 5, 6 years later. But someone like that we collaborated with, and Kerry Chandler is somebody I would love to do something with him. He's one of my favorite producers, and it just seems like a genuinely great person. Um, that's one of the guys, and I've got to know guys like Kenny Dope over the years. He's a hero of mine, someone like him, and even DJ buddies like uh, DJ Rich Medina and DJ Spinner. These are all guys I feel like I could potentially collaborate with if time permits and it works out. But yeah, there's quite a few, but those are a few off the top of the head.
And then last question, if anyone wants to book you, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you? Should they hit you up on Instagram?
You can hit me on Instagram via message or email me at worldshipmusic@gmail.com. That's just my label name, World Ship Music, all one word, @gmail.com. Or yeah, just find me on Instagram at DJ Aaron Paar. That's AARONPAAR. There's a lot of A's in there, so make sure you get both A's in both front and last name. And yeah, that's it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, take care. Have a good day.
Peace.
All right, peace.